Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of MTE's Mobile Education powered by the Rag Company. As always, we have live education every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm Sheldon Kay. Today, we're going to be talking with Mike Phillips and machine wet sanding. So Mike and Nancy, I'm going to bring you in. There you go. Take it away, Mike.
Hey, this class is it's going to go over how to do what's called machine sanding or machine damp, D-A-M-P, damp sanding. And the reason it's kind of referred to as damp sanding is because you use very little water. Back in, I think, 2009, I did a complete damp sand on a 1970 El Camino. And I took a picture of my water container, which I filled to the full 32-ounce mark. And after I was done sanding the entire El Camino, that's a full-size vehicle, I'd only used 16 ounces of water. So therefore, damp sanding, not wet sanding, not a big wet mess everywhere. But let's just talk about wet sanding real quick, just in general, if you don't mind.
Hey, Mike, sorry, real quick. Yancy, it doesn't sound like Mike's microphone is coming through.
Mike isn't Mike?
It sounds like it's really far away.
All right.
Let's fix that.
Let's fix that. That's bad, my mouse. All right.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Better, Sheldon?
A little better. Still sounds like it's pretty far away, Yancy.
I got him up pretty much blasted.
Okay.
I can talk louder. Is that better?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Okay. Okay, so let's just talk about, Sheldon, let's just talk about sanding, wet sanding in general. Because a lot of people hear this term. What they don't know is 90 to 95% of all is done on either collision work. That's where someone wrecks their Honda. The fender's replaced, the fender's repainted, and then the body shop will go in and do some light sanding, usually on the repaired painted area to match the orange peel of the rest of the car, just so it has a uniform look. Also to remove any excessive orange peel, drips, runs, DIP, which is dirt in paint, and any other kind of modeling or surface texture. They want it to look good, but that's on new paint, fresh paint, on an isolated repair area of a car. The other type of wet sanding is done on something like this. This is a 1972 Oldsmobile Cutlass, and it has an amateur restoration with a custom paint job. And in most cases, for projects like this, the painter will put on extra paint. They put a lot more time into the car than, say, the assembly line did when it's just, mass producing daily driver cars. So most wet sanding is not done on the factory finish of the car in your driveway. It's either done in collision work or custom paint jobs. And then the question is, why would we wet sand? Why sand down perfectly good paint? And the reason for that is usually to improve its appearance. And this car, for example, has excessive orange peel. And this is probably one of the most common reasons custom paint is wet sand, is because after it's sprayed, the paint dries like you'd see on the surface of an orange. That's why it's called orange peel. And what it is this hills and valleys. If you were to look at it from a horizontal point of view, it's little hills and valleys. And what it does is when you look at the paint, like even right now when I look at this paint, the reflection of the lights overhead are all, I use the term warbled. They're marbled. They're not uniform, and they're not very accurate. It's really hard to see the light and clear defined lines. So sanding, what it's going to do is it's going to flatten the paint out, and then of course you come back and you compound and polish to restore gloss and clarity, and then when you look at a reflected image in the paint, it's very defined. There's a term for that called DOI, distinction of image is what that stands for. And a mirror, like if you look at a mirror to see how you look before you leave the house, a mirror has 100% DOI. And right now I'd say this paint has about 30% DOI. So it's not good. So that's why we would wet sand, to remove surface imperfections, maximize the DOI, and to create a beautiful mirror finishes, like people would say a show car has a mirror finish. So those are the reasons to wet sand, and that's where wet sanding is primarily done: collision work, custom paint jobs. I know when you go up on social media like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, you'll see people machine sanding the factory finish on some new car. And if you know what you're doing, you can do this safely. There's tools to do this, but I would say for most people, you really shouldn't be doing this type of work unless you've got experience or you got someone with you that knows what they're doing, because it does require some special tools, some special sanding tools. The sanding discs I'm using are 3M Trizac. I think a box of the 3000 I have right here is $140. There's 15 discs. That's basically $10 for a single disc, okay? So it's not a cheap process. If you put it in the context of washing and waxing your car, it's definitely gonna cost you more money. But any questions over that so far, Sheldon?
Nope, not yet, Mike. Go ahead and keep going, and then I'll interrupt you at a good time.
Okay, so there's all types of ways to wet sand. There's hand wet sanding, there's dry sanding, there's machine sanding. And what I'm going to demonstrate here is what I consider something that's very, very safe. This is using a sanding disc put up by 3M called 3M Trizac. And the face of this disc is actually smooth. It feels like a piece of paper. And the abrasives are embodied in a medium. Think of like Jell-O. And this Jell-O is cured, the abrasives are in it. And when you work this against the paint, it starts to break in the medium. This medium starts to break down, expose the abrasives. They start to do their job, start to cut and abrade the paint. And so it's actually a very safe way. And what's kind of cool about this is you can use it by hand or machine. The 3000 comes in 3-inch and 6-inch. I have both of them here. And then what that allows me to do is use them on different size tools. Sometimes when I'm out in the garage, I don't know if this comes in 5-inch. I know the 5000 grit comes in 5-inch, but a lot of times what I'll do is if I want a 5-inch disc, is I'll just take something that has a 5-inch circumference or diameter, and I'll place it on there, take an ink pen, draw a circle around it, and cut it out and make my own 5-inch if I want to work with a 5-inch sanding disc. So, you know, sometimes just think outside the box. To do this, today I'm going to show how to use the Griot's Garage G9. Now, this is a 9mm random orbit free spinning polisher. And, you know, most machine sanding's done with smaller orbits, but for this type of work, this works completely fine. And for a lot of people, this could be a tool that you already own. So it's a dual purpose. You can compound, do paint correction, machine waxing, and you should also do some machine sanding. And this could come in real handy also if you do boat restorations. You're working on a boat that's, say, 10 years old, it's been completely neglected, it has very deep oxidation. You could use this tool to machine sand with on a boat, which is much safer because Joko thicker. Anyway, then the process for this is basically, I've already wiped this dry. I would suggest before you start to take and make sure it's absolutely clean. This is a little prep wash made by my friend Dr. Jim Beasley. Clean microfiber towel, and you just want to make sure that there's no light surface dirt or dust, any contaminants, because the last thing you want to do is get anything trapped between your sanding disc and the paint, because that could put in a deeper scratch. When you're sanding, that's called a pigtail. When you hand sand and you leave a deeper scratch, that's called a tracer. So machine sanding, they're called pigtails, and this because they look like a little pigtail, say on Porky Pig. It's a little curve. Okay, so when it comes to machine sanding, one of the things you want is you want a clean source of water. I've got a little bit of car wash soap in here. You could probably use any kind of soap, but what the soap does is it lubricates the surface as you're abrading it. It also helps the paint that you're abrading off to help it from loading up on the sanding disc, which would stop it from cutting. So you can get more lifetime out of the sanding disc. There's also a little tool here that I suggest you get. These are called interface pads, or Griot's calls theirs an inner flex, INNERFLEX, one word. So interflex or interface pad. And all this is it's a layer of foam, and one side has hook and the other side has loop. So this will attach to your backing plate, and it'll also attach to the Trizac sanding disc, which has got the hook on it. And what the interflex does is it provides some cushion. And what the cushion is going to do is it's going to enable the face of the disc to conform to the curve of the panel. And also it smooths out the sanding process for you, and it makes it a little bit less aggressive. So this being 3000 grit, which is most of us would consider very high level grit, very non-aggressive, is a very safe way to sand. If you're new, you can also get this in 5000 and even 8000 now. I'd say the 8000 is really not going to do a whole lot because this has some fairly major orange peel to it. Anyway, so let me go ahead and just demonstrate how to do this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put my Interflex. This is a Griot's Interflex. It's a 6.5 inch. And this is the G9. It comes with a 6-inch backing plate. I meant 6-inch. 6-inch Interflex pad. And you always want to center this up as best as you can. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and attach my sanding disc. Center it up so it's very centered up. Okay, then the next thing you want to do is go ahead and put down some soapy water. Put a little bit on the sanding disc if it's brand new and dry. Cord over shoulder, just like any standard procedure. And then I'm going to go ahead and sand. Because this is a fairly large flat panel, I'm going to use a crosshatch pattern, just like a lot of you would do if you were doing paint correction work. And there is a reason to do crosshatch pattern. Here's a couple reasons. One is you want to do what's called UMR, Uniform Material Removal. I want to remove just as material here as I remove here, as I remove here, as I remove here, over the entire panel. So by doing a crosshatch pattern, I'm going to sand the same amount of time over each square inch of this section that I'm buffing. So that's one of the reasons to use a pattern. Another reason would be is because every time you go out to sand on something, you can't try to like make up an idea of how you're going to move the polisher. You just need to have best practices already in place. It's also something you could teach employees that they can remember, you know, back and forth, side to side, back and forth. So crosshatch pattern. If I was sanding on a long thin pad, then I always let the panel be my guide, and I would just run the sander or the polisher in the direction of the length of the panel and try to get an overlap in if possible. Anyway, one of the things you want to do is I always like when I start out to turn my my polisher speed down all the way to the #1 setting. I'm going to turn this on, and then I'm going to start bringing the speed up until I see good pad rotation. So let's go ahead and do that. And so right now, as you can see on speed 1, it's not rotating at all. There's speed 2, and it's rotating, but if I rock this around even just a little bit, I lose my pad rotation. So I'm going to come up to the 3, and even there, I still have really defined pad rotation. There's 4, that's pretty good pad rotation. So then I'm just gonna go ahead and start making my overlapping passes. Change, go a different direction. And I've went over this section twice now. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and wipe off and inspect. And the reason I'm doing this, and I only wanted to make a few passes to start with, is to gauge how fast this 3000 grit is sanding and leveling the orange peel. And the reason you want to do a few passes and stop and check is because there's this thing called top coat hardness, okay? So this is custom paint. I don't know if the paint's hard or soft, so I need to test it. And I do that by just making a few passes and then inspecting. And when I use the overhead light and I'm looking down here, I can see that it's knocked down some of the orange peel, but not a lot of it. And you can still see shiny specks everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just do a standard 8-section pass here, then stop and look at it and take a look at it. And if I'm happy with it, then that's as far as I would go. And before I do start, one of the things I want to notice is I've taped off this piece of chrome trim up here. And the reason why is upon inspection of this car, there's actually DA sanding marks already in the trim. Here's a whole bunch right here. So the people that prepped this, they machine sanded it to prep it for the primer, and they accidentally ran their sander into the trim and scarred it. And it's really hard for the average person to get these types of scratches out. So it's better to tape it off. I put 2 strips of tape on here. I'll be careful myself, but sometimes the human muscle works in such a way that you flutter, you don't have perfect control. And if I accidentally come off the panel, then I've got that trim protected. It's better to be safe than sorry. Always keep the polisher moving too. Don't let it sit in one place very long. It is sanding.
count these out. 1, 2, 3. And as I'm sanding, I'm starting to see this dry up, so it's okay to go ahead and stop. Lay down a little more water. Remember where I'm at, 3, that was 3 section passes. 4. 5. 6. 7, and I'm going dry, so a little more water here. There's 8 solid section passes. Notice I was using a fairly brisk arm speed, not too fast, but you definitely, because this is sandy, you don't want to put it in one place and let it just sit there. It's going to sand. So keep the polisher moving. This is one of those things also that I often teach in my classes using the buddy system. You know, if you've got a girlfriend, a wife, buddy, someone that can be out there, and if you need water, instead of you having to stop, you just say, miss me or squirt or something, water, and let the buddy go ahead and miss the panel. And that way, you can knock the job out a lot faster. Okay. And wow, that looks very uniform, very flat. It's going to be very easy to buff this out. One of the things I would say about machine damp sanding with a high grit like the Trizac 3000, 5000 sanding disc is it's actually doesn't take as much skill as it takes to hand sand with a normal sanding paper or finishing paper and a backing pad. The most important thing is to keep it moving. Don't buff over the edges. I have a thing I call the rule of thumb. If you actually go to Google and type in the rule of thumb and add my name, Mike Phillips, it'll pull up my article. It shows my thumb. And what I do is I put my thumb next to an edge or a raised body line, and then I try to stay about a thumbnail distance away. And the reason I do that is because wherever I go, I take my thumb with me. So it's my measuring unit that I have with me, and I just try to stay a thumbnail distance away from edges. And the reason for that is because you don't want to put sanding marks where it's hard or dangerous to buff. And of course, if I have to come in here with a buffing pad and buff along this edge, it'd be really easy if I wasn't careful to burn through the edge. So, but that's why you do that. So at this point, then the next thing I would do, and do you need to get like a close-up of this or anything, Yancey? Does it help if I put something down here to measure off of? Or a light? A finger?
Let's get a light. Let's see if we can capture.
Okay.
It might blow out due to the fact.
The metallic flake, yeah, it tends to really mess with the camera.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful color, by the way.
Yeah, I kind of can't see. But go to the edge and we'll show the side. You can go ahead and take your light off.
Okay.
Show your edge where your thumbnail is, right where your hand's at. Your right. No, your other. Come down.
Okay, like that?
No, come down on the side.
Oh, the side. Yeah, right here.
Yeah. See,
okay.
there's the thumbnail.
Shiny paint.
Yeah. Okay.
So then people say, well, Mike, what about removing the orange peel next to the edge? Okay, look, you can do it. It can be done. It just gets more complicated and time consuming. So if you want to, I mean, you could, if you got nerves of steel, you can machine sand. You could machine sand very close to it. You could put a strip of a vinyl tape on here to protect the edge, sand right up to it. Then you could come back and pull your sanding marks out. Instead of trying to buff this area with a big wool pad, you could use a more precise tool. You could actually work it out by hand. You could get a tool like the Nano or the Flex Pixie, a micro tool with a 1-inch fiber pad, and slowly work these out. But you're talking, when you start looking at all the edges on a car like this, you're talking about hours and hours and hours of extra work. And so one of the things I point out to people is if you go to car shows where you would see a car like this on display, most of the time, if you look at the big flat panels, you're going to say most of the orange peel's gone. And as you start getting to the edges, you see the orange peel kick back in. That's because not only do I not have the time to do meticulous perfectionist work to a car. Most other people in the world don't either. So they take the fast, easy way out and they just sand, a little ways away from the edge or a raised body line. Make sense? Okay, so the next thing you want to do after this is then you want to pull your sanding marks out. You can do that with any kind of tool. My preferred method, rotary buffer, wool pad. This, of course, is the cordless Flex PE14. I've already been using it on this car. It's dirty. So anytime you're going to use a wool pad on a rotary, always have a spur and clean that pad. Especially, if someone else may be in the garage, you don't know where that pad's been. So that would look like this. I like to turn the speed up on this. Actually, I had to come around the side a little bit too. Just clean that pad really well. And then lay down what I always call is a strip of product or a bead of product. And for a full-size pad like this, I do something about the size of a pencil. So if you look at that, the width, the height, the length is about like a number 2 pencil. And then there's this thing called picking up your bead using the 10 at 10 technique. And what that does is it picks up the bead of product into your pad in a way that isn't slinging all over you, people around you, or the rest of the car. And the way that works is, we've covered this before, but just to show you, when you look down on your polisher, sloppy me. When you look down on your polisher, it's spinning clockwise, okay? And what you're gonna do is you're gonna put this flat against the paint, tilt up the left-hand side about 10 degrees, and run that strip in at the number 10. So if here's a clock, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, so on, 6, 7, 8, here's 9, here's 10. Pick that up at the 10. What happens is that bead's coming in like this, and the pad pulls it into itself instead of throwing it everywhere. And not only is it a good way to pick up your product and then spread it out, but it makes you look cool too. Like, you really know what you're doing. So that would look like this. Boom. Then lay it down flat, spread your product out. And then the technique I like to use is I go up on edge. And with this tool here, it's really easy to make this look easy. But you should hold it with 2 hands, especially if you're new at this. I'm pressing down about 5 or 10 pounds. And this is another way to really help you to gauge paint hardness, is just make a few section passes and then wipe off and give the sanding mark removal like a percentage. Is it 50% removed? Is it 25% removed? Is it 85% removed? So there's 3 section passes. Let me get a fresh towel. I'll just wipe it off. And if this came out fairly easily, then I would think that this, look at that, this paint wasn't too hard at least. To me, it looks like I got all my sanding marks out. What do you think, Yancey? No? Yes?
I had to reach. I had the mute button so far away I could barely reach it. No, it looks like from this distance, it looks like you got all of them out.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull all the rest of the sanding marks out, then we'll polish it, then we'll be open for questions. But that's basically how you damp sand. You get all your tools ready, make sure the car is clean, tape off anything that needs to be taped off, and just go at and get at it.
Wouldn't there be one more step though to remove your holograms from using the
polisher?
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Yeah.
Okay.
So here's my wool pad. I'm going to go ahead and pick my bead up again, spread it out. Okay, product spread out. I'm going to bring this up to the 3 setting. What I was doing there is just take care of all the sanding marks there by the edge. And it's always a good idea to also, you don't want to make the same pattern when you're pulling out sanding marks, because it's just too easy to possibly leave some behind. So if you look, I just kind of went diagonal. You could do a back and forth, whatever floats your boat, I guess. I'll do one more section pass here. Okay. Clean towel, wipe this off. And really at this point, you want to be able to inspect and confirm that you've removed all the sanding marks. The polishing step usually will not do this. So as I look through here, the sanding marks are all gone. And then the next step would be to pull out your holograms. Just in case anybody is unsure what that may mean. Anytime you're using a rotary polisher, so it has a single action, it just spins in a circle, and especially if you're using fiber pads, these fibers are a form of abrasives. And when you push this against the paint to pull the sanding marks, it pulls the sanding marks out, but it imparts its own defect called holograms. Or as I like to say, I like to be very specific and say hologram scratches, because that's what they really are.
Once you hit it with the light,
Sure.
I should be able to see that. Just move it back and forth and I can see the, yeah, see, you can see the holograms in there.
Okay. And because I'm using a very refined abrasive technology, the only thing that's really putting the holograms in for the most part are the fibers, so they're very shallow. I know some guys say you shouldn't go up on edge with the rotary. I always say everybody can find their own way to do it. Here's what I know. It's a lot easier on me to buff for hours if I go up on edge than try to hold that thing flat. It's going to yank me all over the place. And again, because I'm using a refined, it's an engineered abrasive, the only thing that's really putting in the hologram is the fibers. That means they're very shallow and they're going to buff out real easy. So I'm actually going to use the same compound. This is a really nice compound. It finishes out like a polish. This is a foam polishing pad. It's actually a Rupes 180 millimeter CP. And this is the Super Beast, or the Sea Beast, sorry. It's a cordless beast. Okay, so I spread my product out, and I'll just do like 5 section passes. One. Two. 3. 4. Last one. Bring my pressure up. Just some real light polishing. This tool is also very, very easy to use. Gear driven orbital. Lots of power, no pad stall. And on paint like this, flawless results. Okay.